Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling, well, a really enormous mission. We're cutting across centuries, continents, different forms of capital entirely.
Yeah, from the raw steel and oil of the Gilded Age.
Right, all the way to, today's highly leveraged finance and instantaneous data
It's a
flows.
huge landscape.
So our goal here is to synthesize this massive stack of source material we've gone through and really trying to extract the DNA, you could say, of radical ambition.
And it's a deep dive that goes beyond just, how much money someone made. We're really looking at the common threads, the characteristics shared by these groundbreaking and often, let's be honest, deeply controversial corporate titans.
Absolutely.
The core theme that seems to unite them, I think, is this profound paradox of relentless drive. It's the capacity to achieve these truly visionary, sometimes world-changing goals, but almost always through methods that are, well, relentless, uncompromising, and frequently morally ambiguous.
Exactly. It's that foundational contradiction, isn't it? The one that really defines power. So in one corner, you've got the historical figures like Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller.
The industrialists.
Yeah, their empires built on physical stuff, steel, oil, and total control over the supply chains. Their success kind of set the American precedent for market consolidation and industrial ruthlessness.
And then you flash forward, and the whole landscape of wealth creation is just fundamentally shifted. We go from controlling iron ore supplies to mastering like the flow of information.
It's a whole different game.
Totally. Modern power comes from incredibly complex financial engineering, think LBOs, private equity, or from these hyper-competitive tech founders obsessed with data, speed, absolute market saturation.
So for you, the listener, you really need to see this evolution. It's control shifting from physical assets to leveraged capital, and now finally to these sort of invisible algorithms.
Right. It's a fascinating progression.
Let's unpack that evolution then. We really have to start with those giants who kind of wrote the first chapter on American industrial control. Andrew Carnegie, the steel master. He showed this incredible capacity for picking executives, managing conflict, and just, well, sharp business sense. I was really struck by how he set up his corporate structure, recognizing talent and then financially locking it in.
Oh, the deal he structured with Henry Clay Frick is just a masterclass. Early financial engineering, basically.
How so?
Well, after Carnegie's brother Tom died, he desperately needed executive talent, right? And specifically, Frick knew the Coke industry inside out, which was crucial.
Okay.
So Carnegie offers Frick a 2% share in Carnegie Brothers. But here's the brilliant part, and it really does predict modern corporate finance.
Yeah.
Frick didn't have to put down a single dollar up front.
Wow. So it was essentially a leveraged contract, built entirely on future performance.
Precisely. The full cost of that stock, plus interest, it was just deducted over time, directly from Frick's share of the future profits.
Smart. Very smart.
For Carnegie, it was low risk, high commitment. He got this incredibly able executive, and crucially, he financially locked Frick into ensuring the company's maximum profitability.
Because his own wealth depended on it.
Exactly. His personal wealth was totally inseparable from Carnegie's exponential growth. It's that kind of inventive structure, ensuring loyalty through, well, immense personal gain.
And while he's consolidating talent internally, he's deploying, psychological warfare externally, especially with the railroads, right? They were essential for shipping his steel.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about that dramatic bluff he ran against the Pennsylvania railroad officials.
Okay, so this is pure high-stakes industrial negotiation. Carnegie gets his hands on highly sensitive competitive data, the specific freight rates the Pennsylvania Railroad was charting his rivals.
Oh, spicy.
But he didn't just use the data, he paired it with action. He armed himself with those rate figures and the actual detailed blueprints for a new rival railroad line he threatened to build.
Whoa. So he didn't just ask nicely for better rates. He basically showed up with a ready-to-launch nuclear option.
That's exactly right. It forced the Pennsylvania Railroad officials into negotiations under massive duress. They had to choose: lose Carnegie's enormous business entirely, or dramatically lower his rates to a pre-agreed level.
Just to get him to scrap the plans for the new line.
Just to get Carnegie Steel to promise they'd abandon the plan. The bluff, backed by all that detailed preparation, it paid off massively. And it really solidified Carnegie's belief that leverage and conflict, when managed clinically, were the highest forms of business strategy.
It's incredible, though, how that same aggressive drive he used in business later showed up in his attempts to influence global policy
Mhm.
and curate his public image as this, advocate for
He
peace.
genuinely seemed to believe his knack for strategic conflict management could work on a global stage. We see him pushing President Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, for treaties of arbitration. And even more tellingly, he warns Roosevelt against expanding the U.S. Navy. He tells the president that reversing his earlier stance would make him look impulsive, excitable, or maybe even frightened by conditions which you alone know.
Wow, telling off the president.
Carnegie saw himself as this grand strategist of peace, basically,
Yeah.
willing to criticize the most powerful man in the country to push his own vision of global influence.
And his philanthropy, it mirrored that pragmatic, results-focused approach too, didn't it? He was really committed to specific technical training, saw it as the fastest way to social mobility.
Yeah, that put him right in line with Booker T. Washington.
Mhm.
And that's a key detail. Carnegie wasn't just, throwing money around randomly. He agreed with Washington that technical training addressed the most immediate needs of black communities. So his grants were super targeted.
Like Tuskegee and Hampton.
Exactly. Huge amounts for the time.
Mm.
$620,000 for Tuskegee,
Right.
$441,045 in 5 days for Hampton. And he was visibly impressed by the work at Tuskegee, where students showed self-sufficiency by making every single brick for the library he funded.
Wow.
He called Washington one of the geniuses of the century. He valued that tangible, measurable impact above pretty much everything else.
So if Carnegie mastered the bluff and the strategic image game, his contemporary John D. Rockefeller, well, he perfected the brutal efficiency of elimination, though his ethical reckoning came much, much later.
Rockefeller's strategy was almost surgical in its ruthlessness. Just pure elimination of competition to control capacity.
How do you do that?
He'd take over plants,
Mhm.
often just to shut them down instantly. Eliminate excess capacity, he'd say. He notoriously ridiculed many of the refineries he bought as nothing but old junk, fit only for the scrap heap.
The sources say he might have paid a fair price for some of this old stuff, but the climate of fear he created just gave rivals no choice. They had to sell.
Exactly. It wasn't just market dynamics, it was psychological dominance. He bought the physical assets, sure, but he also bought the certainty that they would never threaten him again.
Total control.
And once Rockefeller had a plan, the sources describe him as like a projectile that once launched could never be stopped, never recalled, never diverted.
Wow.
That rigid, unyielding nature, it's critical. It shows that becoming the richest man in the world required this profound, almost pathological self-belief and an inability to be swayed by, external pressure or moral criticism.
But that same unyielding projectile, eventually it needed a softer landing, didn't it? That rigidity built the empire, but it just wasn't compatible with modern public life. He needed a big, deliberate ethical shift later on.
He realized he had to sanitize both his image and the operational ethics of Standard Oil. And that meant hiring brand new men subordinates who were totally ignorant of Standard Oil's predatory past to defend his current ethics and manage his public image.
So, actively recruiting people untainted by the company's past actions.
Precisely. By surrounding himself with figures who had no connection to his, let's say, lawless past, like the farmer pastor Frederick T. Gates Rockefeller, was essentially kept on his best behavior. He was locked into this new moral regimen he couldn't easily escape.
And bringing his son Junior into it further cemented that shift.
Yeah, it helped the dynasty transition, effectively, moving from that heroic but ruthless age of consolidation to one where philanthropy and public respect became, defining characteristics. This act of rebranding itself was, well, a masterpiece of corporate strategy.
Before we jump into modern finance, we have to touch on one figure who just embodies the ultimate paradox of image control: Howard Hughes.
Oh, Hughes, yeah.
His obsession with control seems entirely focused on external perception, even while his internal world was just collapsing.
Hughes was obsessed with his public persona to an almost unbelievable degree. You see it really acutely in an internal memo he wrote in 1968. He demanded that he not be referred to as a mere millionaire.
Mere million, it can almost hear the indignation, the horror.
Absolutely. He was terrified that if his own publicist called him that, his enemies would spin it as a financial flight backward from his established sacred status as a billionaire, especially with that huge TWA judgment hanging over him.
Right.
He felt there was only one thing worse than being broke, and that was everybody knowing you were broke. The image, that was the asset he protected most fiercely.
Yet that intense focus on the external image, it stands in such stark, almost tragic contrast to the physical reality of his later reclusive life.
Yeah, when he was transported later in life, the reality was just shocking. Pathetic, really. He was seen wearing only a bathrobe, nothing underneath.
Oh, my.
An observer noted his toenails were so long they curled up, he was wearing sandals.
Yeah.
It's just a devastating reminder that the absolute control these titans sought over markets, companies, public opinion, it rarely, if ever, translated into control over their own bodies or psychological stability.
The internal cost of that radical ambition can be just absolute self-neglect.
Yeah, a cautionary tale for sure.
That decay of the Hughes empire, it's actually a powerful segue into the modern era, where the whole nature of corporate control shifts dramatically. From owning physical refineries to mastering abstract finance and leveraged capital, which brings us squarely to the rise of private equity.
Right, this is the age of financialization, defined by the leveraged buyout, or LBO frenzy. For you listening, the core mechanism was this colossal substitution of debt for equity. Meaning debt became so cheap, the term so lax, that private equity firms could borrow massive amounts of money leverage to buy companies for way more, substantially more, than the company was worth on the stock market.
So they're using a little bit of their own money, leveraging it up hugely to buy big assets, maximizing their returns and risk when they eventually sold.
Precisely. And it created this terrifying landscape of the barbarians at the gate era. You had corporate raiders like KKR famously battling for RJR Nabisco.
Right, the book and the movie?
Yeah, but we also saw internal operators like Jack Welch at GE pioneering a whole new kind of financial ruthlessness from inside the company.
Welch was really a pioneer in treating even a perfectly healthy company like it was distressed, like a turnaround job, preemptively squeezing them from within.
That's the key innovation, really. Welch was arguably the first major CEO to take a healthy, well-regarded company and just impose radical, immediate layoffs, tens of thousands of workers, and use aggressive deal-making to expand into any industry possible. Didn't matter if there was synergy or not.
Wow.
The sources call him the first CEO to squeeze a healthy company from within, often showing no commitment to people or product if it didn't hit his, arbitrary growth metrics.
And this era saw fierce rivalries emerge, like between KKR and Blackstone.
Oh, yeah. You see the intensity of this new capital war when Steve Schwarzman dismissed KKR as just a one-trick pony focused only on buyouts. Meanwhile, Blackstone was aggressively expanding into advisory, hedge funds, real estate, and buyouts. It showed the need for diverse financial control mechanisms.
This era also proved that ethical compromise didn't exactly die with the robber barons, did it? It just got way more sophisticated, more abstract, leading to rampant inside information and market manipulation.
We saw that pervasive attitude, didn't we, in the 80s insider trading scandals, perfectly summed up by Dennis Levine. He justified his illegal actions by claiming basically everyone is doing it.
That's the classic rationalization, isn't it?
It really is, that radical self-interest. He even went so far as to claim he'd physically riffled through a colleague's desk and had copies of that person's trading records, using them as proof that insider trading wasn't really a crime. It was just the established, necessary game on Wall Street.
Unbelievable. And the LIBOR scandal with traders like Tom Hayes, it shows how specific and deeply technical this manipulation became, moving from simple insider tips to actively, cooking the books of global interest rates.
Yeah, the LIBOR rate, just to remind listeners, was the rate banks estimated they could borrow from each other. It affected trillions of dollars in financial products globally.
Huge impact.
Massive. But the definition of LIBOR was so fuzzy and regulatory oversight so, non-existent back then, that Hayes and others could manipulate it pretty much with impunity. He used highly specific tactics, asking colleagues to literally cook up fake data to push rates higher or lower, whatever suited his trading positions.
The sources mention a specific technique, switch trades. What was that about? How did that help the manipulation?
The switch trade. It was a tactical masterpiece designed purely for camouflage. Hayes would execute simultaneous offsetting trades across different brokers, essentially laundering the transaction's purpose. For an outsider, it was nearly impossible to spot the true direction or the real intent of the manipulation. It just looked like normal high-volume market activity.
Hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. Hayes was effectively acting like, an athlete whose performance keeps improving even as they get older, but whose methods are hidden deep inside these impenetrable global financial institutions.
And what was the personal cost of maintaining that kind of criminal intensity? It must contrast sharply with the public fantasy of the untouchable financial titan.
Oh, the cost was immense, both mental and physical strain. During his legal proceedings, Hayes was described as being in such intense distress, physical and mental, that he'd clutch a handle in a taxicab so hard his pulse was just racing uncontrollably.
Wow.
Yet his own colleagues could joke about him eventually retiring and sitting on his, quote, yacht in Monaco. That joke just highlights the vast chasm between the self-imposed reality of that kind of radical ambition, the constant vigilance, the fear of discovery, and the public fantasy of effortless, untouchable wealth.
As finance got faster, the pace of capital control sped up even more with the high-speed data war. The source we looked at said the incentives are now basically screwed up by design.
That's the core finding, really, in the world of high-frequency trading, or HFT. The structural incentive problem is created by practices like payment for order flow, PFOF.
PFOF.
Right.
Explain that again.
Okay, so online brokers, like TD Ameritrade back then, they accept payments, often hundreds of millions a year, from HFT giants like Citadel, just to send them their customer orders first.
Why does that rig the game? I mean, the retail customers get free trades, don't they?
They get free trade, sure, but the HFT firm gains this critical advantage. Milliseconds of advance notice on what bigger institutional investors might be about to buy or sell based on the aggregate flow of all those retail orders.
Ah, I see.
This lets the HFT firm trade ahead of or even against those orders. They profit from the information asymmetry created by PFOF. Essentially, the price the retail investor gets is just slightly worse than the one the HFT firms secure for themselves using that speed and information edge.
So it created a market that was structurally rigged against the regular investor, which eventually led to counter-innovations like the IEX exchange.
Exactly. IEX was created specifically to counter these microsecond predators. And their solution was ingenious. It was both technical and kind of rebellious. They identified the same super-fast subterranean fiber routes that HFT firms had paid millions to build. But then they introduced a physical mechanism, a 350 microsecond delay in processing all orders on their exchange, like a speed bump.
So fighting speed with delay, that seems counterintuitive.
It does, but it worked.
Yeah.
That tiny delay acted like a necessary head start in a foot race, as the source put it. It was just long enough to ensure that IEX was faster to see and react to the wider market than even the fastest HFT predator. It neutralized the advantage created by PFOF and stopped orders from being front-run or abused on their exchange.
Fascinating. It's a perfect illustration of how radical ambition today requires engineering systems not just for profit, but also for defense against other hyper-optimized players.
Absolutely. It's an arms race.
Shifting gears geographically now, the modern power game is rapidly moving towards global data dominance, and China seems to be taking a massive lead in this data war.
Yeah, China is effectively becoming the Saudi Arabia of data. Their systematic commitment to what the sources call grunt work, the heavy lifting involved in deploying mobile infrastructure for everything from food delivery and car repairs to shared bikes.
All that groundwork.
All that groundwork is rapidly vaulting them ahead of the U.S. in digital data production. And this isn't theoretical. This real-world deployment is laying the absolutely indispensable high-volume foundation for Chinese leadership in AI implementation.
And this massive data advantage, it seems fundamentally built on a difference in cultural acceptance around privacy, something that's maybe hard for Western audiences to fully get their heads around.
Precisely. Americans tend to be, pretty uncomfortable with the level of surveillance implied by Big Brother. But in China, there seems to be a broader, more pervasive willingness to trade some degree of personal privacy for just unparalleled convenience and efficiency.
And how does that manifest?
In really stunning ways. Alibaba's City Brain, for instance, it doesn't just optimize stoplights. The sources detail how it actively monitors jaywalkers and can even automatically issue fines based on facial recognition data pulled directly from city camera feeds.
Wow. So surveillance filters up from individual users to entire cities, feeding these massive policing and traffic optimization algorithms.
That's the key takeaway, yeah.
Yeah.
You see it on online merge-offline retail experiences, too, where shoppers are identified via facial recognition for, tailored experiences. This level of granular data feeding highly centralized algorithms provides a strategic, economic, and geopolitical advantage that the West, constrained by privacy concerns, is really struggling to match. It's a different paradigm.
Okay, so we've covered the historical titans, the new financial architects. Now let's look at the modern gods of technology. They seem to blend that ruthless strategic vision of Carnegie with Rockefeller's relentless drive for control, but all through the lens of data. Let's start with Bill Gates. The analytical genius with apparently a truly vicious competitive edge.
Gates's genius was clear from childhood. His math chairman at Lakeside School noted he could just see shortcuts through algebraic or computer problems. Possessed an analytical mind as good as any he'd ever worked with.
Impressive.
And Gates himself, he was most proud of the basic program he wrote back at Harvard, called it the coolest program I ever wrote.
Why?
Specifically because he prided himself on squeezing it into just 4K of memory and making it super fast. It shows that early, deep appreciation for efficiency and optimization.
But that raw genius was paired with an almost savage intensity in the business world, right? A non-negotiable drive towards market dominance.
Yeah, descriptions of his negotiation style include things like almost a viciousness. He was known to push so hard, so relentlessly, that he'd sometimes jeopardize the deal itself, or just get mad at a customer.
Wow. Not great salesmanship necessarily.
It wasn't about compromise or finding mutual ground for him, it seems. It was purely about dominance, securing every possible advantage. And the competitive focus was made totally explicit to his team. He stated the goal clearly. We're going to put digital research out of business, apparently punctuated by slamming his fist into his palm.
So when we look at figures like Gates, do the sources give us a sense of whether that viciousness was like a personal thing, a pathology, or just a rational, hyper-aggressive market strategy needed in the winner-take-all software wars of the 90s?
The sources strongly suggest it was more the latter. Less about pathology, more about a strategic belief that there was simply no room for second place in the platform wars.
Okay.
His intensity was the operating principle of Microsoft back then. A total commitment to eliminating threats, ensuring his product became the ubiquitous, unquestioned industry standard. Anything less was seen as existential failure.
That focus on absolute control and uncompromising vision, it's even more famously associated with Steve Jobs, isn't it? The mercurial architect of design.
Oh, absolutely. Jobs operated entirely within what became known as his reality distortion field.
Right.
A conviction so strong it basically just overrode the skepticism and logical boundaries of everyone around him. It wasn't just charisma. It was like an active force demanding immediate, complete alignment with his vision.
The anecdote about the engineer Hertzfeld and the power cord, that perfectly illustrates this demand for immediate obedience, doesn't it?
It's a classic example. Radical ambition demanding instant results. So, engineer Andy Hertzfeld is busy finishing up an Apple II program. Jobs decides Hertzfeld needs to join the Mac team right now.
Uh-oh.
So Jobs just walks up, yanks the power cord out of Hertzfeld's computer, destroying weeks of code, presumably, and says, the Macintosh is the future of Apple, and you're going to start on it now.
Unbelievable. The means just didn't matter.
The outcome his vision realized was everything. And his clarity on product vision was visceral, too. His intense, absolute hatred for the stylus-based Newton.
Which he saw as John Scully's big innovation record.
Exactly. That hatred is so telling. He famously argued against the complexity of the stylus, saying, God gave us 10 styluses, and waved his fingers in the air. That really defined Apple's future. Intuitive, simple, controlled design. No stylus needed.
Yet, even the architect of absolute control, he had reservations about the future and about his successor, Tim Cook.
He did. When reflecting on Cook, Jobs called him a cool customer, an unflappable negotiator, clearly valuing his operational skill. But he added that serious reservation. Tim's not a product person per se.
That's a profound distinction.
It really is. It highlights that tension between the passionate visionary, like Jobs, who sees the future product, and the effective operator, like Cook, who makes sure the machine runs smoothly.
And that tension between visionary passion and cold metrics, it became a defining theme in the next generation of tech giants, particularly highlighted by the clash of cultures between Instagram and Facebook after the acquisition.
Oh, yeah. Facebook's approach to corporate control is just entirely analytics-driven, relying on data dominance far beyond anything seen before.
How?
They automatically catalog every tiny user action, turning human interaction into variables. This includes, get this, words users typed, but then deleted and never sent.
Seriously?
Seriously. Posts they merely hovered over while scrolling, even calculating a numerical friend coefficient between 0 and 1 to precisely define the strength of relationships.
Wow. Treating human interaction like a set of variables to be optimized and monetized, which led directly to imposing strict financial goals on Instagram, right? Regardless of Instagram's founding culture.
That's exactly where the clash became visible. Mark Zuckerberg presents the Instagram team with this chart. It shows their current ad revenue trend line next to a far steeper, non-negotiable $1 billion goal. And he offers health, if they can't meet it.
Which probably wasn't a friendly offer of help.
Probably not. This sudden imposition of massive financial metrics just clashed violently with the existing Instagram culture. Early employees consistently rejected obvious money-making ideas like adding a simple regram button because they prioritized maintaining that grassroots kind of charm-focused startup vibe over pure devotion to analytical optimization.
So the ultimate lesson here is maybe that radical ambition, when driven by scale like Facebook's, inherently threatens to destroy the very grassroots charm and vision that made the acquired startup attractive in the first place.
Absolutely. Facebook's model is all about total measurable efficiency.
Yeah.
Instagram's original appeal relied on this sort of unquantifiable cool, right? The moment that $1 billion chart arrived, the analytics-driven control mechanism took over. It just demonstrates that at the highest levels of tech today, data and metrics often supersede the original mission or vision.
Finally, we have to look at Elon Musk, the modern industrialist combining spaceflight, electric cars, Neuralinks, the absolute epitome of high-intensity ambition, whose career just seems defined by relentless expectations and explosive drama.
Musk himself has admitted he's a drama magnet, hasn't he? Citing that psychological tailspin of 2018. And his lashing out often happens over issues that might seem small from the outside, like an employee leaking info about scrap material at the Nevada factory.
Right. Seems minor in the grand scheme of building rockets.
But for Musk, even minor imperfections or leaks are seen as almost existential threats to the overall mission. Control is paramount.
And his expectation of unrelenting intensity is legendary, creates a culture that's famously difficult to sustain, I imagine.
That intensity really is the engine of his companies. There's a story where, after a successful launch, he visited Pad 39A late at night and saw only 2 people working.
Okay.
Despite knowing he had 783 employees down at the Cape, he flew into what was described as a cold rage, demanding to know why only 2 people were present. For him, the optics of intensity seemed almost as important as the actual effort itself. Everyone needs to be seen to be working flat out all the time.
And he applies the same intensity internally, right? Treating knowledge and alignment as the ultimate currency.
Yeah, we saw that when he clashed with the vice president over Twitter's FTC consent decree. Musk immediately challenged him. Can you tell me what the main principles are in the consent decree?
Put him on the thought.
Totally. When the VP couldn't satisfy him with immediate, detailed knowledge right then and there, Musk fired him promptly. For Musk, any perceived softness, any lack of preparation, any error, it's met with immediate, unsparing consequences. The control he exerts isn't just through corporate structure, it's through relentless intellectual and emotional pressure.
So this entire deep dive, stretching from the industrial age right up to the age of AI, it reveals these consistent, really powerful patterns defining radical ambition.
Yeah, you definitely see them. There's the unwavering requirement of profound self-belief, Rockefeller's absolute faith once a plan was set, Jobs' reality distortion field, Musk's unrelenting intensity.
Right.
Then there's the necessity of using conflict as a strategic tool. Whether it was Carnegie's bluffs against the railroad, Gates' explicit goal of eliminating competitors, or the kind of financial warfare waged by KKR and Blackstone.
And crucially, we see the constant, enormous effort needed to control the public image and perception of that power. From Howard Hughes, terrified of being called a mere millionaire,
Right.
to Rockefeller's strategic shift towards ethical philanthropy by hiring those brand new men.
The essential contradiction, though, the one that runs through all of this, is the conflict between personal ethics and corporate achievement. The sources consistently show that achieving success on this massive scale often requires this unique blend of visionary insight and ethical compromise.
Yeah.
Financial titans who committed fraud, like those involved in insider trading or the LIBOR scandal, they often rationalized their actions, did they?
Right.
Thinking they hadn't really done anything wrong or, that everyone is doing it.
Yet their actions were never just isolated, were they? They could cripple entire economies or lead to the systemic failure of others, like we saw in Southeast Asian banking, where these godfathers basically plundered banks, crippling entire nations' financial health.
So this forces us to ask, what does this whole trajectory mean for you, the listener, living in a world now defined by the control of information? Maybe even more than finance.
Oath question.
The historical ambition required sanitization.
Right.
Rockefeller had to clean up his image eventually to survive. But modern ambition, it seems to be built on an inherently conflicted foundation from the get-go.
So if the historical titans needed to compromise their ethics privately and then sanitize publicly, the modern power structure seems to require an inherent ethical compromise right from the start. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly the dilemma. We've seen China commit to a model where market advantage and convenience are directly traded for mass surveillance data. We've seen Facebook quietly cataloging everything users type, but don't even send tracking thoughts that never become actions.
Scary stuff.
It is. The acquisition of market advantage, especially in the age of AI, seems fundamentally predicated on the deepest possible penetration of personal data.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. If the whole concept of an ethically neutral business titan was already pretty shaky back in the age of oil and steel, how can it possibly survive today, when the very foundation of market advantage, the data itself, is built upon monitoring and measuring every unspoken word and non-click of its users?
Are the tools of power today inherently tools of surveillance? Does the relentless ambition required to win in the 21st century inevitably, maybe universally, demand the erosion of personal privacy?
Something to think about.